All right, so I'd like to call the January 26th Planning Commission meeting to order, and pound. And if we could all say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and
to
to
which
it stands,
one
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That does not come through well.
Yeah, all together now.
We're never making a record.
All right, so did Jim Kelty show up?
Yep.
He's there. Okay, so everyone is present.
There it
Yep.
is.
I'll let you do the roll call. Danielle?
Neil Otland,
Here.
David Newbill,
Here.
Jenny McKay,
Here,
Jennifer Sevigny,
Here.
Lynn Shank. Yes, ma'am. Jim Kelty,
He's muted.
Jim
he's
Kelty.
muted.
Unmute yourself, Jim.
I'm here.
Okay.
Here we go.
Sorry.
Jim Christopher.
I'm here.
All right. Everyone is present. You know, in one of our, it might have been our last meeting, I don't recall, Ben Tallarico had suggested during a Zoom call meeting that we do a roll call vote on every motion. And I just don't think that's necessary. I think as we go through the procedural, you know, approve the agenda, approve the meeting minutes, you know, that kind of stuff. If there's a nay, we'll go back and do a roll call vote. But for just the pure procedural motions and, you know, if everyone's in agreement for the standardized ones, let's not take the time out to just do a roll call. Where we need roll call votes, we'll continue to do that. But I just don't see a need, unless someone else does, but I just don't see a need on every motion to do a roll call.
Sounds good.
I always take silence as acquiescence, so good. All right, so Danielle sent out recently in an email the meeting minutes for November 24th. So if you've hopefully had a chance to take a look at those, I actually just printed them out and I was halfway through it. But I don't see anything that requires corrections or, and I don't have really any comments.
Chair, I have one correction. At the very bottom, it's just a small typo. It says Michelle and Bennett discuss, and I think it should say Bennett, or either our first names or our last names, but it was Jenny and I, since I am Michelle Bennett.
Oh, yep.
Okay,
That's- Thanks.
Oh,
anything else?
I didn't see anything that I would disagree with.
You know, if Lynn's talking, it's very hard to hear. I think she was making a motion, but I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Yes, Lynn made a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting minutes are approved. Next is the approval of today's, or this evening's agenda. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion, we approve today's agenda for January 26th. As it is written.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Second by Neil. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved for this evening. I do not believe we have any resolutions or communications to cover. Danielle, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so the next item on the agenda would be the public hearing regarding a rezoning. And we need to open the public hearing. And we'll do that by a roll call. We'll conduct the public hearing and then we'll close the public hearing again with a roll call. And then we'll do we've done it different ways, but after the public hearing, we're not, we'll take whatever action is recommended in the public hearing. Michelle, is that correct? I mean, we've done it both ways. We've done it in the public hearing. I think we just do the discussion in the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then do the motion and action after that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so motion for whatever action we decide to take after the public hearing will come after we've closed the public hearing. Okay?
Will public comments be part of the public hearing or separate?
Yes, yes, yes,
So we'll
yes.
have to move that line.
yes. All right, so that's how we're gonna go forward. So I need a motion and a second to open the public hearing.
Do you want a roll call?
I make a motion, we open the public meeting for rezoning of this property, 02 400 Old 31. That's 707. At 707.
Okay. Second,
I'll second it.
that Jim Christopher.
Yes.
Okay, and now we'll do a roll call vote, Danielle, please.
David Newbill,
Yes.
Jenny McKay,
Yes.
Jenny Sevigny,
Yes.
Lynn Shank, Jim Kelty,
Yes.
Jim Christopher,
Yes.
Neil Lovin.
Yes.
All in favor, then we are now in the public hearing to discuss the rezoning of the Raves property from an REF, the current REF zoning, to PUD or a sort of a mixed usage zoning. Do we have anyone present tonight to talk about this?
Robert from Raves is here.
Okay. So Robert, we had some discussion.
How about,
Oh, he's there in the room. Okay.
He's coming around, Jenny.
Okay. So just while you're getting in front of the camera, you're gonna have to move a little closer to Bob or move, yeah, thank you. So we had the discussion in our previous meeting, just a general overview of the plans for the property and some of the content that you're looking to have on it. You had some sketches for us to review. But because we're now in the public hearing, can you just give a brief overview of what you're looking to accomplish on this parcel of land?
Yes, we would like to take the first 300 feet deep, and that would just be for retail. And we're proposing two.
Any way we can get them to talk a little louder?
If you want, it might be. It's hard to do this. Grab a seat if you want.
We're proposing the first, on the 1,000-foot of road frontage, 2 entries, and the 300 feet deep would be for retail along there, separate buildings as we do it. And then the back part of the property would be, most of it would be site condos or just storage buildings. They would be around 1,000 square foot with a bathroom and maybe an office. Or RVs, people's cars, or even stuff from the park. People wanted to keep stuff there, but just an extra garage that people can have. And we talked in the last meeting, we would put in the laws that it wouldn't be retail sales out of those buildings. But it's just for small business guys to work in them, getting their equipment, storing it there, and maybe leaving and doing a little work on their trucks and stuff like that. But there wouldn't be retail sales out of it.
So, you know, we've had a couple of discussions regarding this property, and the impression that I have had through these discussions is that it's really more than just your standard storage units where people are going to take and store their extra furniture, boxes of stuff, that it's actually more intended to be where commercial businesses can store perhaps their equipment, or maybe somebody's got some carpentry tools and they may, rather than working out of their basement or having it in a neighborhood community, you know, where they're kind of working out of their garage or pole barn, they take the equipment and put it into this metal 1,000-foot square, you know, space. And it may have, you know, their own office where they would do record keeping and, you know, et cetera. But it wouldn't be where someone would come up and buy things out of it. They wouldn't be able to do any sales. It would be just a place for many of the people in our community that have their own businesses, an opportunity for them to have a commercial site and a more business front, you know, location where they can, you know, have an actual business address, but they don't have to invest in a building or the brick and mortar that many of the, you know, single business owners would not want. And that's why they're working out of their home. So we thought it would be an opportunity to get, you know, a space for the small business owner and give them opportunities for space. Because, you know, if we think of it in just terms of the rental space for stores like boats and old, I don't know, furniture, whatever people store in storage units, it really, my understanding of what your intent was, it was going to be more than that. Not that it would preclude people from doing that, but that really wasn't your vision. That's why you're looking to include a restroom in the facility, because somebody could go in there and, let's say, again, maybe they're a carpenter and they're going to go in and they're going to make up bookcases that they're going to install in somebody's house. And so they would have a restroom in there. Am I correct?
Yes, but a lot of it is just people with RVs and old cars and stuff too. They really like the concept. Heated, but it's not a place to run a retail business in.
You'll have to repeat that again.
It's not a building to run a retail business out of. It would just be for a small businessman, like you said, that have different businesses and just homeowners that need extra storage in a 1,000-square-foot garage for their toy cars, and toy, you know, cars they drive around, like an antique car or whatever, that kind of thing, and their RVs and boats and other stuff that they don't have room on their property.
And so if somebody came and stored their old car there, is it your intent they could refurbish that car on site in that facility?
Yeah, they could fix their car with you. Yeah, not going to be some kind of manufacturing place. But like you said, maybe a carpenter wants to work on some of his stuff and then take it to the job and install it. He would work in the buildings. And so we have to, as we go along with this, we'll want to work with you on, you know, the bylaws for that stuff to make sure. We want to make sure too, someone doesn't try to live there. So we have to be really firm about that. It's not a place to live. So that we have to work with you on as we get further into it. Come with our proposals on that.
Do any of the other commission members have questions or comments regarding this? Lynn?
how do we stop sales? What if somebody has made some cabinets or something, and then they decide, oh, well, let me get these people coming in and they're looking, oh, yeah, you like that? I'll make you some more. How do we stop the sales? Is it going to be in the rules that you cannot have sales? Is it going to be in the rules that there's no one allowed to live on the site?
Yeah, we'll have to put it in the bylaws, which,
So this is something you will set before us.
yes,
Okay,
as we get further into it. And plus, we're looking around, so we'll bring that when we come to get approval of the buildings and everything. There will be a berm, like we said last time, that hides the buildings from the road. And then the bylaws will have to work out.
Can I interject for a sec? Well, just to make sure we're on the same page. When you're saying bylaws, are you referring to the development agreement?
No, we want to do these as site condos where people would buy them.
Okay,
Wouldn't be just storage things for people to bring their extra furniture while they're moving for a year or two. It's the idea is to have a heated space they could bring their vehicles in and work on, and if they have a business, they could keep some of their equipment in there.
okay, well, for the planning commission as well, whenever something is zoned a PD, there's an additional layer because it doesn't follow, a traditional zoning code. There is a development agreement as well. So a lot of other details that aren't outlined, like in a traditional zone, can be worked out, if anyone was concerned about that.
No, thanks, Michelle.
So as a site condo, would that have rules similar to like a homeowners association
Yes,
where they would have requirements they would have to meet, appearance, parking, that type of thing?
yes, but there's not going to be a lot of parking. It's just to come into your place and park in front of it. And this part of it would be gated, and we would also maybe like to offer the community some just storage ones too that aren't, you just pay a monthly fee to store, maybe 20% of them or something like that.
Jenny, I've got some questions.
Jim, go ahead.
Our presenter's first name is Bob, right?
Yes,
Bob, I didn't see any, which doesn't mean they're not here. Do you have any proposed elevations of, not the retail, but of the condominium units? 1 story, 2 story?
just one story. Somebody could put a loft in them, but we're thinking of 12-foot high doors, so maybe it would be 14 to 16 feet high inside.
So potentially, if I was restoring an old Studebaker, I could put it up in there and work under it, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And this is a question to I'm going to say our whole group, but perhaps to Michelle. This is my first opportunity to dance with a condo in a planning commission. Do we have the good gracious, do we have the latitude to be able to comment and I'm pulling this kind of out of thin air, push our will on Bob by reviewing the bylaws? Not to anybody that might have experience in this. That's a new concept to me. I applaud, Bob, the opportunity that you're giving the commission to kind of put our wishes there, but do we have that right to do it?
I would have to look into that more.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, Jim. And I think that we probably do not have the ability to force any type of a change in a bylaw, but that would be through the development plan that Michelle referred to, that we would put that together, such as no living, no retail sales out of this, no sales period. I don't care what the sale is. No sales out of these buildings, blah, blah. And then he has to, I would assume, he then develops the bylaws based on that so that he has his own business interests contained in the bylaws, plus he's conforming with the requirements of the town.
So in other words, I personally appreciate what you're trying to do. The vehicle remains to be seen, but the communication is there.
I think so.
Can I
We'll
make it?
wait on Michelle to confirm that. Bob?
When the chairman and I met originally with the applicant, they were very upfront about what they wanted to do. And I think both Jenny and I thought this is really what the intent it was when we adopted the PUD zoning. And I believe, if my recollection is correct, that Ben said the value of the PUD is we can put some restrictions in the approval for the development that we might not otherwise be able to do. And in exchange for that, the applicant gets to mix some zonings in there. The only thing that came up really, and Michelle brought this up to our attention later, typically when you look at somebody's property description, and it's like my property at my house, if you look on the tax rolls, it says it's 6.95 acres. If you look on my deed description, it actually says it's 7.2 acres because the differential there is the easement under the county road, which is still technically my property, but I can't use it, so the tax assessor pulls that easement out. It's been like that in the 40 years I've been here on every piece of property on a public road I've ever looked at. And so when the applicant said, you know, I got like 39.5 acres, I said, well, it's probably 40 with the right of way under Dixie. To my surprise, when we had the assessor check it, it actually doesn't include the piece under Dixie, and I can't tell you why. So he really does have 39.5 acres. Now, I'm not sure how it got divided that way, because most of you know that 40 acres is like a quarter section. There's a lot of parcels out here that were originally 40 acres. My guess is, I think the ITC power line.
They took the highway.
Yeah. See, typically, when ITC's power grid goes through, it used to be Detroit Edison's. And in the case of the township's property where the power line goes through, we still own all the property under it. There's just an easement that restricts us from building on it. So it's part of our acreage. What Detroit Edison did before they sold it to ITC was go along a lot of the farmer parcels and say, we want to own the little piece under the power grid. And they got a lot of little different pieces of property that have been sliced and diced for little pieces. So they could say we own right where the power grid goes. So I suspect if we could ever figure out how to dig far enough back, that was a 40-acre parcel, and somewhere along the line when it was farmed, somebody sold them a little piece of the back where it's now the ITC corridor. And that's why it technically doesn't meet the 40 acres. I assume it was like literally every other piece I've seen for 40 years here. It's the only one I've seen that isn't that way. But I think the intent here, unless you disagree, Madam Chair, is I think these people are trying to do what we thought would be in line with the development of the Dixie Highway corridor. And I think the benefit that you pointed out in the meeting we had was we do have a lot of small businesses in the township, and this would allow some of them to have a legitimate commercial address for their business in one of these site condos, even though they may be doing all their work on site somewhere. Like we've got people who do hardwood floors. They don't really work out of their house much. You know, they go to the site and do most of that stuff. And there are other people that do similar things, and it would fill kind of a need that both Jenny and I thought existed in the township. So from that perspective, both Jenny and I, because I said, I'm pretty sure it's 40 acres, you know, every other one was, said, why don't we use the PUD here first? But then Michelle correctly in her analysis said, well, it's not actually 40 acres. So I think the board has to decide if this is the kind of development we're looking for and the kind of project we want, and I think Jenny and I thought it was, then maybe it's a reasonable way to eventually offer a variance for it because it's slightly half an acre under 40 acres. And it's probably the little piece that runs under the power grid.
They took the wedge. They did take it.
Yeah, I'll bet it's a half an acre. I'll bet it is.
Yeah.
And so it seems a shame not to do what we've all been trying to get done on Dixie Highway, because somewhere in the history of the township, Edison at that time bought a little piece of pie-shaped property that their power line. But I just wanted to fill that in on how we got here, because I said at the meeting that Jenny and I were there, I'm sure they got 40 acres. It's got to go to the middle of Dixie. And it's the first piece I've ever seen that doesn't do that in 42 years.
Hey, Bob, one comment on that regarding PUDs and the 40 acres. That 40 acre requirement is a Groveland specific requirement. That's not a Michigan requirement.
You're absolutely right. We picked that when Ben and I were talking. We did that because, and I think Michelle pointed this out in her comments in the letter. We did that because we know there are some larger parcels, mostly old mining sites like the townships, that we thought would be much better developed if we had the flexibility to use the PUD development. And I think Ben came up and said, well, then why don't we do it for 40 acres or less? Or 40 acres or more. And there are a couple of pieces of property along Dixie that are 40 or I think 175 acres. There's a number of those, and that's really where we want to do it. I know there were some references that we only wanted to develop the Dixie corridor between Dixie Highway and I-75, but I think everybody will agree our intent all along is to have both sides of Dixie Highway developed, not just one side, the other side left empty fields, so to speak.
But the whole goal of that PUD was exactly that. For large parcels of land, it gives you more flexibility in the zoning so that you can do mixed use things exactly like this project.
Exactly. So the intent was we thought we would be able to garner a better quality development for the township that would meet our community's needs and desires better if we had a little flexibility on the bigger ones. You don't want to do PUD, I think, on 5 or 10 acres. It's just not really that well suited for it. But when you get 40, or in this case, 39 and a half, or 75 acres, they lend themselves very well to a better quality of development. And that, in fact, is part of the reason, and I'll talk about it later on your agenda, about why we've been looking at sewers, that ultimately, for some of those bigger parcels, sewers would allow a greater flexibility in the development and use of that property that we wouldn't be artificially constrained by. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's the whole purpose for the Dixie Byway, the whole purpose for looking at sewers and trying to allow larger parcels deal, as you said. So I just wanted to add that because when this first came about, I thought it would be good to get planning commission input. So I asked Jenny when she was still here if we could meet with these gentlemen and go over it. And they were, I think you'd agree, Jen, very forthright and answering questions, giving us an idea what they wanted. When we said we didn't want a bunch of storage units up visible from Dixie, they said, well, we'll put a berm behind the retail stuff to the commercial stuff so that it's not really visible from the road. And this piece of property is north of the subdivision that's on Threadvale, or on Trip Road at Dixie. It's the next piece of property north, and I think it's pretty much all empty right now. The whole 40 acres is empty right now. And then the piece after this one is the one that has the one house on it that's I think being purchased, I think, by the haunted house. And then the next piece is the Rotten Manor haunted house. So, it's kind of with the power grid in back of it and the subdivision to the south of it, it's really kind of isolated from everybody.
No.
I mean, we own the 22 acres south of the property that butts right up to it. And also Thread River is part of our property. We've got major concerns because our property floods out 2 to 3 times. We've lost our driveway because of that man-made bridge that they are using or have written down in the proposal of getting to the backside of that property that butts to our property. It's caused us to flood lose our driveway at least twice.
I'm sorry.
And
Mark, can you give everybody your name and address, please?
Gary Rich,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Gary Rich, 7335 Trip Road. We own 22 acres that butts up to this land.
Okay.
It's a residential property. We've owned it for 22 years or 19 years. I'm
You're at
sorry.
the end of Bavarian Woods there, right?
Pardon me?
Are you at the end of that Bavarian Woods development?
I
the
believe
just
that's to
behind
the
it.
west of us. Yeah. You mean the new sub that's on right off of Trip Road?
Yeah.
Right by Dixie Highway?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the property that's to the west of us.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the power lines are to the east of us And the property that was just purchased is dead north of us that butts up to our property.
Okay, I got you.
And we have the concerns of,
who you were when you commented, and what is the concern you have?
our major concern is what they're gonna do for retention water, storm retention ponds, what they're gonna do for that bridge, how they're gonna get to the backside of that property that joins to our property. And what are they gonna do to make sure that the property's not gonna, our property's not gonna flood out, because everything flows north here, as you guys know, in the Thread River. And that thing is dammed up. The beavers dammed that up several times in the past. We've had to go down there and pull the dam apart because we lost all of our driveway and everything.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Well,
Yes.
typically, I think, Michelle, you can comment, typically, when a site plan's submitted, all of the water runoff and those kinds of things has to be addressed by the, in our case, it's Orchard Hills, the engineer, right?
Yeah, that's what we just want to make sure of that. And we're also concerned if they're doing, you know, obviously we're a residential property and we're looking out at our part of our river that we own. And the rest of it is obviously, you know, some of it's in the wildlife area. The rest of it is the property that was just purchased. But, you know, that's been our serenity here. And, you know, we bought this with that in mind. Now what's going to happen to our property values if we got to look out and look at commercial buildings? Also, what are they going to do for us for privacy and people, you know, tracking into our property? That's some of the concerns, but our biggest concern is the flooding. And what are they going to do to make sure we don't lose all of our property and our property value for that matter?
Well,
Gary, your property is immediately to the south of this planned development?
To the east side of it, yes. The area where they were saying that they want to build the property or the storage facilities on the other side of the river.
Yeah.
That butts up to our property.
Okay, so you're east of the property.
Well, no, our property line is in sync with theirs because we are west of the power line property. So both of our properties are west of the power line, and then our property is due south of theirs. The Thread River runs right next to our house between the pole barn and our house, and it runs through our property, zigzags about 3 times.
Okay.
And like I said, it's flooded several times to where, you know, we almost lost our driveway completely.
So I think I'm getting an understanding where your property is at. And if I'm understanding correctly, when we discussed this, and it's been a while and I might not recall, but and Gary or Bob, you got to help me understand. In the proposal, we have frontage on Dixie Highway that you are proposing be left undeveloped in the initial stage, and later that would be for retail development along Dixie Highway. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then kind of in the middle of the property, you were looking to have these site condos for more commercial business type use. And then there was a discussion, and I thought it was around where that creek's at, that was going to be also kind of for some future development, but I don't recall now because that wasn't, I thought, part of the original proposal. Am I correct about that?
Well, on the,
Yeah, I don't know if you can, oh,
on the
you got a
east side
better
of-
one than I got here. Maybe if you can.
there's a
hold it
little
up to the
bit, there's
camera.
land on the east side about, I guess about 5 acres. It's not wetlands.
Of the creek.
Yes.
It's your parcel. It's east of the creek. You say you've got about 5 acres.
Yes, of the
And
4.
is that parcel touching Mr. Rich's property? That 5 acres?
Yes, from what he's saying, yes.
Bob, if you could
Yes.
put the camera there, maybe they can see that and it'll help them a little bit.
You guys see that?
Kind of.
Just up a little bit.
All right. So show me where the creek is. I think it's got to go up.
So this is Raves. This is the 7335. Here's the lake, and then here's the creek that goes all through over here.
And so where is the residence, Mr. Gary Rich's property?
Right here.
Right there?
Where are you showing it, Daniel? Yeah, that's it, right? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure you had the right spot.
Don't knock me.
Okay. Okay. So what we're looking at is the southeast section of this 39.5 acre parcel. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's of concern with the resident. Am I correct about that?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So now, does everyone have an understanding then of where everybody sits in a position? Now, what I'd like, Bob, if you could just describe what your plan is for that section of the parcel.
Well, the dam seems to be partially man-made. Somebody's got pallets in there and blocks. And I went back 40 years and it kind of seemed to always be there, but there are times it was out and it's moved positions in the aerial photos. We don't have any problem taking it out. They said it's still going to be wetlands, but it's rated as wetlands, that whole area right now, but it's only about 3 feet high. It's not much. I'm surprised it just doesn't wash out at some point, but so we would just build a bridge over it, but it depended on how you want. I assumed you guys back there would want to make sure, because it would, I mean, when it's gone out before, I think the pond on your property I saw is still there. So we don't want to affect you, so I'd be more than happy to meet with you, and whatever we do, we didn't want to affect the neighbors by pulling out the dam that could wash out at any time, and just leave it as is, but maybe fortify it in the new bridge, but we could just put a bridge over it and let the water run and pull it out if it's a problem.
How big of a bridge are you guys talking about?
Oh, just a single car, just enough to get to that back property. There is some kind of, like, they've got the dam there and they've got stuff.
Is it wetlands in the? I'm a little confused as to where the wetlands are. If you cross the creek, is it wetlands to the east?
Well, the creek, all around the creek, about 25% of the property or more is wetlands of the 40 acres.
Would you plan on building in the wetlands?
No, we've had it surveyed and that'll all go to the state. They have to approve it all, I've been told, and it's part of our survey right now. And they've done all the boundary survey and they surveyed all the wetlands.
Well, who will own responsibility for the condition of the wetlands?
Well, I mean, it's our property. There's a dam there, but it's like partially beaver made and man-made. I don't know who owns it, but it's there. I personally, I thought initially just drain it, take it out, but I thought it would affect them to the south. But I've seen it when it's been out before. It appears to in the black and white aerial photos, and their pond is still there. The pond, I think the pond on your property was put in the 60s when it first showed up in the 1963 aerial photo.
Well,
Okay,
it's all part of the Thread River. Or the Thread Creek.
Yeah, but in 1940, that big pond that's back there, and I think it's on your property, if I'm correct, it wasn't there in the 1940 photo.
The pond is not part of the creek and it's behind the house. That was man-made, yes. And it still stays there, but it is no part of the creek. The only thing it does is drain into the creek on overflow.
Okay. Well, anyway, if you guys wanted that out and it's causing a problem, we have no problem pulling it out with an excavator. It would only take about 30 minutes.
I don't know if we want to do that. I mean, that's part of our property is the creek, and, you know, like I said, the river runs through our property. And
I meant the dam.
Yeah, I don't know what that would do. I just know that the beavers dammed it up a couple times years ago, and when we had a bad rainstorm, that we ended up almost lost our driveway, and the water rose up about 6 feet. And that's our biggest concern, is for something like that to happen again.
But that dam isn't holding, bringing the water up 6 feet. Right now, it appears to
Oh,
be
it-
3 feet high.
Well, trust me, it has,
Oh, well.
because we had to go down there and tear out the beaver dam just to get it down to where
Maybe
we
they had
could
it
get
higher.
into our driveway.
Yeah, maybe they had a
Pardon?
higher core. We have no problem removing the beaver dam the way it is now and letting it go back to what it was. They said it's, even if we do that, it's still going to be, the wetlands aren't going to change.
Right.
So it's already been surveyed, we're gonna turn it in, and then it goes to the state, and that river is even comes under the, national, I think the EPA, he said, I believe, but.
Yeah, well, that river continues on 2 or 3 miles north.
Yes. The creek, I mean, it's a creek.
The creek, yeah.
Goes all the way to Genesee County.
I believe it goes all the way to Genesee County. So, you know, I mean, I gotta think there's people smarter than us that would regulate that. You know, I don't think that's up to us or you.
It's probably gonna be Eagle, the DNR, that's gonna
Yeah,
decide
that's
whether or
what
not
he
you
said.
can do anything.
Right.
It's called Eagle now, EA, I forget the acronym.
We hired an
I
environmental,
wanna-
went out there and surveyed.
All right, I want to go back to an initial question that I had, and that is that parcel of land on the east side, which is going to be on the other side of the creek. What planned development do you have for that? Because as I understood the discussion we had before, you were going to be west of that creek on your parcel as to where these site condos were planned. And that when we talked about the parcel of land, that 5 acres roughly on the east side of the creek, that you didn't have definite plans for that yet. Is that true?
That's correct. We don't have definite plans. We thought it could be storage or maybe office space or, you know, we hadn't decided really.
Okay. So, I mean, regardless of what you would develop, it would require a site plan. And
Right.
that site plan would require the township engineer to review it. And part of that review would be any impact to the wetlands, you know, any impact to water runoff off of that development that would affect any surrounding properties. So all of that, before a site plan would be approved for anything you would want in the future, all of that would have to be reviewed through an engineer with, I think, the very concerns that the residents would have as far as impact, you know, particularly in the wetland area, to the creek, to their property, to flooding, et cetera. So, and then my only point is, you know, to Mr. Rich, is that the applicant right now doesn't have plans for that, but the rezoning that we would be doing tonight would allow mixed use development. So he could put an, you know, like he said, another storage facility back there. I would have to come, you know, and get a site plan approved. But anything that he would put back there would have to have an engineering review of.
Well, the far east corner of the properties, pretty much southeast corner is all wetlands. There's a little tiny piece that is in the very south corner is not wetlands. But the wetlands goes right up to the property line to the ITC. And then is further north.
Bob, we have our whole back property, which is probably about 400 yards wide, is not wetlands, and that butts right up to your property, that 5 acres that you're speaking of.
Well, we just had the survey. It shows that they're telling me it's wetlands, and that's what it's on our survey.
Well, part of the creek is, yeah, but there's still a swab that goes from the power lines over to the creek or the wetlands. There's still 200 yards of use. I mean, I hunt back there all the time. You know, we walk it. We've got property, or we got lines that we walk our property boundaries on, and it's high and dry back there.
Well,
on our property.
on our part, they show the wetlands going within, there's only in that very corner over there, they're only showing about like maybe 100-foot diameter area in the very corner that's not wetlands.
Yeah, I've got the engineering drawing in front of me where they've defined the wetlands, and they do show the wetlands right up to the property line. And whether, to Mr. Rich's comment, it's dry or not, the engineering team that did the survey does show wetland all the way up to that property line. And
Okay, on his property?
Yes.
that's not going to show up.
Okay.
I think you can see that.
I didn't see those plans. It's just the plans that we got down at Groveland Township. It shows like 6 or 7 buildings on a road, obviously the road going across the man-made bridge that's there now and Beaver Bridge. But it shows like, what is that? 6 or 7 buildings that are running from north to south on the eastern far side of that property. And then, obviously that.
Wasn't that the western side? I'm sorry.
This
No,
would
the
be
eastern
east
side.
of the property right here, and this would be the wetlands and the property line.
Well, I think we had one building over there and that,
There's
initially,
3.
there was little, like, they were suggested cabins, but I changed it to
Yeah, that's what we're focused on.
we got rid of that idea, but I mean, it wouldn't be practical.
Okay.
6 cabins there possibly, he just threw that out there himself.
Let them know that this is not the site.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not the site, it's a new one, and there's a better one being worked on right now. Which I would be more than happy
Okay, yeah, we
meet with
we
you.
would love to get a copy of that if we could.
I'd be more than happy to meet with you and give you a copy. And walk
Okay.
the property with you.
And Bob, do you have anything proposed of what you would do to kind of, make it so it's, we've been looking for 19 years at natural beauty out behind our house. Is there anything you can do? I know you proposed a berm and some trees out towards Dixie. Is there anything you'd do on the eastern side of the wetlands to kind of block our view?
Well, we can plant evergreens there. I mean, there's 50 feet, but there's a 50-foot setback, so.
Okay.
We could easily plant evergreens. I certainly don't want all the neighbors upset with the buildings.
Right. Okay.
I mean, we'd have to see the best type and maybe plant a variety of them so they don't die. But maybe
Okay.
types and
Yeah.
like that, the best type that lasts now without dying.
Right.
With some disease, I mean, that is affecting them. Like I think all the Norwegian pines have been dying every year.
When do we have a meeting and see your plans?
Yeah, whenever we can, I don't know if we do it at the county or if you and I personally, would like to set up a meeting and kind of see what your plans are.
Well, when we get it, I'll get your number and our email or something, and they can give you my email, and we can email back and forth, and I'll meet you out there with a set of plans.
Okay.
Be more than happy to, and then we can discuss the dam and what we can do.
Okay, I appreciate it.
One of the things that, we've done on the planning commission, and it's always a struggle when you have residential areas and you're looking at commercial development, adjacent to those residential areas. There's always, some level of tension between conflicting, desires. And so, we really try on the planning commission to work with our developers that they do an appropriate level of screening of their businesses, whether it be shrubs or, evergreens, but landscaping, berms, et cetera. Because we do know that, the rural, natural, area that we have out in Groveland Township is what we all moved here for and what we want. And so while we do encourage commercial business because it's good for everyone, and we think this is a good one where it's going to help residents in our community that are currently running a small office out of their house or their garage. It'll give them an opportunity to have a small commercial space that's not going to be cost prohibitive to them. And so we think it's kind of a win-win, but we definitely, to the extent that we're up against residential areas, we want to make sure that we're working with those surrounding neighbors too.
I want to second that as well. I stand behind that as well, Jenny.
Do we have any other questions? I'm going to have a couple more comments, but I just want to get through the commission members. If there are other comments or concerns or questions that you have.
Nothing for me.
Okay, so I want
I
to
can-
next talk about the ordinance that we have right now for the PUD, which is mixed use development. So just so we're clear on that, you know, we have zoning districts in our community where, you know, one's, you know, we call it B1 and it's a business and it says, okay, in B1, you can have certain types of businesses. And then we have industrial, you know, 1, and you can have certain type of industrial businesses where the PUD is going to allow them to have a little bit of a mix. And as Michelle said earlier, while it does allow some flexibility, it also allows the zoning or the planning commission to put a little more restrictions on that we wouldn't have in just the pure, you know, B1, B2 or I1 or I2 zoning. But part of the zoning ordinance is that you have 40 acres in order to do that type of PUD zoning. So if you go, and this is where I struggle, you know, on doing, you know, what's right and doing what's reasonable. And, you know, what's right is that everybody in the township gets treated the same. And we, you know, and if we have a zoning ordinance and it says, you know, A, then everybody, you know, gets A applied to them. And I just hate the thought that we have 39.52 acres. But the ordinance says 40. And so if you go technically by what the ordinance says, we will require the applicant to go to the BZA and get a variance saying, yeah, you don't have 40 acres, you've got 39.52, but that's okay, it's close enough. And so we will give you a variance to the requirement of 40 acres. And you can go ahead and have a PUD zoning. You know, I struggle with that, but then you say, where do you draw the line? Is 39, you know, close enough? Is 38 close enough? You know, the requirement is 40. So as much as I hate to do it for, you know, 0.48 acres, which as Bob said, probably at one point was part of the parcel anyway. I think, you know, if we have ordinances and we're going to apply them uniformly throughout the community, you know, I think we have to say, yeah, we're all in agreement with this, but you got to get a variance through the BZA. So on that topic, I'd like to hear what the other members of the commission think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Looking through the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act, it only specifies 5 to 15 acres is the minimum. And the 40 number comes specifically for Groveland. And even the Zoning Enabling Act says that the Planning Commission may allow a PUD on lesser acreage if it's clear that the proposed PUD substantially provides for the purpose stated, which I think it does. So to your point, getting a variance on that, I think meets what's even written in the Zoning Enabling Act. That we've put that 40 acres out, that's something we control within Groveland. It's not Michigan putting that on us. And if we feel this substantially meets the intent of that PUD, then I think we can go through with a variance. We've reviewed it, discussed it, and then have the zoning board take a look at it.
Lynn, you had a comment?
I agree. You stay with the rules. If it says 40, it has to be 40. You get a variance if you let it less. Let's keep the rules. The law is the law.
I just want to make one comment though, to be clear. So a variance is not a free pass where anytime you don't meet the zoning ordinance, you can just get a variance and get whatever you'd like. That is also regulated by the state and you have to prove and meet certain criteria as well. So that will be up for your BZA to determine, and it's it's not a guarantee. Another thought is that there is, and I, as a planner, I really commend you all for sticking so to the regulations, because that's usually the hard part of my job. I will say, and I don't mean to make this any more complicated, but there is sometimes has been precedent in zoning ordinances, and granted yours does not say this, but for example, with landscaping or with parking lots, whenever you're calculating and the number that's required is 11.6, there is usually written that you can round up, because you can't have 11.6 parking spots, you can't have 11.2 trees. So again, that would be an interpretation. There's no precedent for PDs in your community since it's new. It also does not say that. So you can stick to the 40 and send them to the BZA, but know that they still have to meet criteria to get a variance legally.
Yes, and because we have an esteemed math teacher on our panel who's very familiar with the mathematics, I was going to ask her, if I had 39.52 and I was rounding, wouldn't I round up from that number?
Only go to 6.
What did it say?
I would go to 30. And then I had, but I'm rounding up to whole numbers, folks. So I round up to 39.6 and then I go to a whole number and that gets me to 40, right?
5 is enough.
Well, you know, and I thought about that too. I will tell you, because if it was, and this is how silly things can get, I'll be the first to admit. If it was 39.2, you'd round down, but it's 39.52 and you would round up. And I think for rounding purposes, I would be okay saying that, you know, this meets the 40 without making them go to the BZA. I also chair the BZA, and Michelle is correct. There are 5 usually criteria that we evaluate as we go through. And so it's not just, oh, the planning commission said it was okay, you know, therefore we'll approve it. We do have to go through the steps, and it's an additional cost for the applicant to do that. So, I mean, I really want to be fair to everybody in this community, and I don't want to say, well, this time it's okay, but next time, you know, but I think if we view it in terms of this is, if we can round up and get to the criteria, I could live with that, but I'd like to hear from the other members.
If you're talking about rounding up, you need 2.5 acres to build a house, according to our rules. Okay, I have 2.47. Let's round it up.
But is that what your parcel is?
No, I have over 30
I
acres.
thought so. Okay, well, because that's the whole reason we had the original discussion when Jenny and I met with these people was every other parcel I've seen on a public road in the township in 42 years
Right.
has had the easement under the road, and you have to actually look at the tax assessor record to see in the deed to see what the description is versus what the taxing is, because mine's a perfect example, and they're all like that. My 6.95 acres is really 7.2. And when people come in and they would say, well, how many horses could I have? And it was 5 acres for 2 horses, an acre a portion thereafter that. Well, when we bought our property, we knew we could have 3. And it's because I knew I had the rest of the property. We've done it that way the entire 40-some years I've been here.
Exception.
Well, because I still don't know why they didn't put Dixie Highway under it, because the irony of it is that piece of Dixie Highway is not a state highway. It's a county road, just like Grange Hall Road and Groveland Road.
Really?
Yes, Dixie Highway between where it crosses I-75 in Springfield and where it crosses back onto I-75 north of Holly is the only piece of Dixie Highway that is a county road. And every other county road in this township has the property under the road right away in the deed description of the parcel. Except his, because of that little pie-shaped sliver.
Anybody else on that?
I don't know on Dixie, I would if somebody asked now, because
Yeah.
I've never had it happen anywhere else. But Grange Hall Road, Groveland Road, they're all like that. They go to the theoretical middle of the road right away. The only time they don't is if somebody builds on a private road, not a public road, a private road. Those sometimes only give property up to the road and don't necessarily have access across it. We have a couple of those. So on those, if Danielle gets one, we have to check it. But every public road, apparently except that one piece of Dixie.
And maybe everybody else on it.
And maybe everybody else on Dixie, yeah, I don't know.
So I'd like to hear from the other ones, other commission members.
So a couple of comments from my perspective. I'm going to try to weave some threaded development here, so bear with me. So to Lynn's point regarding if we've got 2.47 acres with a 2.5 acre minimum, certainly if you compare the percentage of deficiency between Bob's example in this hypothetical example with a house, you can see that there's, for lack of better words, I guess, a bigger percentage of being off of the standard with the house than there is with this planned development. Also, I think other factors weigh into it. What is around each property? Is it unbuildable wetlands where it would be insignificant if you granted someone the opportunity to build on a 2.47 acre lot? I think there are many factors that go into, and I don't want to even say bending the rules. What do I want to say? Come on, help me. I think there are many factors in our evaluation of this. And my opinion is if I look at the intent of what we're trying to do and the developer's trying to do, my subjective opinion is I think 39.52 acres meets the intent of the ordinance, and I would say I'm okay with it. I don't know if that makes sense, everybody, but I think you get the idea.
Can I ask a question regarding the example of the 2.47 acres when the minimum's 2.5, but what has the township done in those instances?
I would say typically with a split, because Danielle, if they're close to that, will come to me. And that's when we'll check to see if the parcel's description actually goes under the road or not. I can't think of a piece of property we've done that was actually 2.47. They were probably, because all of these parcels, when they started out as farm parcels, 40-acre quarter sections divided into pens for 4 kids, then divided down later to something else and got down to our 2.5 acres. But I cannot think in 42 years of a 2.5 acre site that I've seen that was not actually 2.5 acres when you included its road easement.
Well, but we have zoning.
And said I had 2.47 acres. On that case, I would probably say, well, if you don't have it even with the road in there, and we have parcels that are with the road at 2.5, you'd probably have to try and do the split differently. We have one today that Danielle and I were looking at, a larger piece that somebody wanted to split, but it couldn't meet the 4:1 depth to width ratio. So I said, there's another way to split that piece, but it's not going to be the way they said it.
As a new member on this board, I wanted to ask what your past precedent had, because I don't have any history or knowledge. I know if you allow this person or this group to if we allow him the 39.5 acres, we become subjective. And I don't think it's the goal of our board is to always be subjective and assume that we know what their intent is. Maybe I'm wrong. Just to share one.
Jenny, that's actually.
I'm sorry?
BZA makes decisions on individual cases, and I have been told by attorney that doesn't.
Okay.
For another one. Now, if the board here did it, kind of capriciously, for lack of a better word, it'd be different. But if the BZA makes the decision and puts the rationale behind what they did it,
Right.
that does not mean that everybody else gets.
It takes it out of our hands.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of.
And I understand that.
Okay, good question though.
The other thing I'd like to just say is an example with me. When we surveyed our property here in Groveland Township, we affected our neighbor to the north as to how many acres they truly had. And if you know anything about surveying, they always start surveying, it's my understanding, they always start surveying the county from the southeast corner to the northwest. And as they do that, the last piece of property in the northwest corner of Oakland County would either gain or lose. And that was our neighbor, and they lost 8 acres. So through all of the lifetimes of surveying Oakland County, she was the one that lost acreage. So going back to this particular piece, I always thought they were all in 80-acre, at least sections, and probably divided. But there are things that happen through surveying that they end up losing or have to be adjusted once an actual survey takes place.
That's a good point, Jenny, because it's fairly common that the old surveys used to be done with something called rods and lengths and chains.
Mhm.
And it sounds archaic, but that's how they did it when they first laid out the township. And actually the chain wears over time. So there are a lot of pieces. When you get them done now, they do it with a GIS locator from the satellite. And there are markers throughout this township. You've probably seen some of the little round holes in the middle of the pavement. And somebody thinks it's, but it's actually a steel marker. That is a GPS locator for the federal government. And that's what the surveyors use now. So when they come to a piece of property on an old farm parcel that was done with rods and links, and then they GPS it to where it really is, you get a lot of people that say, whoops, I thought I had 10 acres, but I really got 9.823 or something. And that happens on a lot of parcels, and it's because, think back in the 1800s or 1700s, they weren't doing it with a GPS satellite. They were doing it with literally sections of chain and rods and laying them next to each other and saying, this is how we come up with that dimension. There's your property line. And then we find out they aren't there. We've had people on Groveland Road that had half their living room on the state land because somebody surveyed it wrong. And when the state decided to go back a few years ago and say, we're resurveying our property, they sent them letters and said, get your fence off of our property. By the way, our property line runs through the middle of your house. If you're real nice to us, we'll sell you 2 feet of it so you can keep your living room. I'm dead serious. And so the point you're making, Jenny, is absolutely correct. The way they did it before compared to the high degree of accuracy today lends itself to very, what most of us would consider relatively minor fractions of an acre that's off. But there's a lot of that happens. And in the case you got, somebody got on the short end of the chain, I guess, and lost 8 acres.
Do we have any other comments from commission members?
No.
Okay. Well, I think we have an understanding of what the proposal is. We have an understanding of one of the issues we have as far as doing a rezoning with the amount of acreage that we have. We've been able to hear from adjacent neighbors. Do we have anyone else in our Zoom meeting that would like to, from the public, that would like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, my name is Mark Lasewski. I'm on Chateau Cove, the southern, in that little subdivision there on the southern end. And I think it's Bob mentioned, I think there's a 50-foot gap or easement between the property line, but that was just my concern, just what kind of green zone or berm or some sort of protection there from a viewer's perspective. I'm not the house totally against the property, but I know that would be obviously really close, and I haven't seen the plan, so I'm not sure how close there'd be potential buildings or things put there. So that was my only concern. And obviously I can come to the township too and look at that as well, but it's just that concern to be able to, like you said, and you mentioned it too, I think, Jenny, just about that's a big concern to try to create a some sort of visual blockage, because that's why we all are here where we are at.
Yes, and I will tell you the conceptual designs that Bob and I reviewed. And one of the reasons we said, you got to put a berm between this and Dixie is it looks like, you know, pole barn type construction, right?
Right.
It's metal and it's like a storage unit, you know, but it's a little larger, so it's accommodating kind of businesses. But it's definitely something that I think the residents will want landscaping and shielding from if you have a view from it. I think that's and Bob, I think you know that as we've discussed it, that's something that would be part of what would be needed to develop this parcel.
Will that, another question, and maybe this is standard, and I apologize, I don't know this, but like in relation to around the property then too, will it automatically be fenced, or will it just be green zoned and open passage?
Well, the units will be fenced in, at
Right.
least a 5 or 6 foot fence, so that people aren't.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that meant like around the total outskirts of the 40 acres, or if it's just the specific areas of where the pole barns, et cetera, would be.
We're gonna keep it, with fenced area would be 50 feet off the property line.
Okay.
Bob, the question though, and I'm not sure I understood your answer, would the entire 39 and a half acres be fenced in, or just that part that's being developed for site condos?
Well, just the part for the site condos is all we had planned on as of right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Jenny,
Yes.
couple things that I want to say. Back to the 39.52, you know, another thing that simply popped into my head while studying the plot plan is that variance that makes it easy for me to round up. As Bob DePalma was saying, you know, I'm looking, it abuts this ITC easement. So it kind of makes it a little easier for me to reconcile, again, back to the intent, and that easement's unbuildable. So to me, it's almost a moot point regarding that. And the only other comment, at least right now, that comes to mind is directed to Bob Stoles and say, you know what, if you go forward with this, build the most aesthetically appealing thing that you can as if you were these neighbors, and engage them and do whatever you can do that's economically feasible, that keeps everybody happy, if you can do it.
Yeah, I agree. We have no problem doing that. So we'll look into it and get with them. So I guess when I get our plan a little more, I can come over and meet with you and walk the property line.
And if it will help, you can.
It's a nice thing to do.
First to go over the prints and then go over there. It's just down the road, so everybody gets comfortable.
Well, maybe that's better. So we can set up a meeting up here at the township with the plan.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yep, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from any of the commissioners? And I'll just, you know, wrap up by saying it is always for me that one of the biggest challenges of following the rules, you know, by dotting I's and crossing T's so that you're fair to everybody in the community versus, you know, being reasonable about the application of our ordinances to situations as they come before us. And I'm okay with rounding up. And part of what makes me okay with saying we don't need to, you know, push this to the BZA is for many of the comments that have been made this evening about, you know, the inaccuracies of over time of parcels. But it's also the intent of what we wanted to do along Dixie Highway. And we're looking for that to be where we try to push if there's commercial development within this community, it's, you know, along the Dixie Highway. And this allows some flexibility of mixed use, but gives the Planning Commission an opportunity to have maybe a little more say than if we just did a straight zoning of B1, B2, or industrial. And so I think this is a good route as we're going forward, trying to develop along Dixie Highway. It allows us to continue to work with the developer to see that the vision we have for, you know, maintaining that rural outdoor, you know, not a heavily commercialized, you know, corridor. So I think it meets the intent, and so I'm okay with saying that this meets the intent of our ordinance on the 40 acres aspect of it. Lynn.
I think legally, if we okay it, let the ZBA do it. I agree that with you, 100%, rounding it up. But legally, if we say, oh, well, okay, it's okay, next time, that's setting a precedence. Let's not set the precedence. Let us keep the rules, and the ZBA, such as, I want to put a garage, I have to put it in front. I can't put it anywhere else because the back of my property is a swamp. There's nowhere else. The ZBA makes that decision. And I think legally, we need to stay completely within the rules. Let the ZBA, and I agree that with you 100%, it should be rounded up to 40. I'm with you 100%, except legally. And I'm sorry, rules are rules.
No, I totally get where you're coming from, Glenn, but this is where I'm going to want Michelle to chime in a little bit, because as I'm sitting here thinking this through, the BZA has legally criteria that they have to use to evaluate a request for variance from an ordinance. And the issue here is the amount of land. You know, it's short, 0.48 acres. And when we look at what the BZA is looking at, and you say, well, you want it legal, they're going to look at different things. They're going to look at, you know, is it, you know, why is it, they look at topography, they look at economic hardship. I mean, there's different things, because typically what we're looking at is somebody wants to build a garage 5 feet closer to their property line. And that's the concept of what we typically deal with, you know, at the BZA. And so there's a set of criteria. The issue is the amount of land that's needed to meet the ordinance. So I'm going to ask Michelle, you know, based on the criteria that the BZA has to, you know, evaluate. I mean, this one's just something we haven't dealt with before, where it's not a matter of hardship. It's just a matter of, do we want to be able to have mixed use development on this parcel of land that's short technically by 0.42 acres? So
Well,
I'm not sure what the view is going to be.
Sure, I'd have to pull up exactly what the 4 or 5 criteria are, but generally, yes, you generally have to prove, you know, for reasons outside of your control, why you don't meet the standard. So falling short of 40 acres, you know, we had originally thought, well, if it's because of easements, that could potentially be something, but I would have to, you know, I'd have to look at what the criteria are. You might be more familiar with them, but you have to go through and show that you're not just trying to avoid the zoning ordinance, that there is like a physical, some of the terminology is like physical and peculiar shape of your property itself the hardship is not self-imposed and it's not financial. You can't say, well, I'd make more money on my property if, you know, the hardship has to be usually based on the land itself that's preventing you from using it in a certain way.
And I think those points are valid, if I might comment here, but you've actually given them the reason, I think. It is odd shaped because the corner of the property has been sold for the easement. That's the practical difficulty. There's two ways to do this. You could either do it that way, or you could literally mend the criteria that we put and say it's 40 acres rounded to the nearest whole acre. And that would do the exact same thing. I think the question is there a practical difficulty? And everybody's indicated, if you don't do this and don't fix it in any way, the opportunity to develop the property on the discussions we've had probably isn't going to be as attractive as what this would be. Now you're going to be saying that, okay, we don't care if this is what we want. We don't care if it makes good sense because of the anomaly of the piece of property that was purchased for the right of way. We're going to force it to be something that might be significantly less desirable and more intense because, by God, it's missing 0.42 acres and it's in the back corner of the wetlands there where nobody is really going to even see it. I think this is a case where I believe there has to be some degree of common sense on how you come up with this. Because you can always fix it the other way. You could change the amendment and say it's 40 acres rounded to the nearest 40 or to the nearest whole acre and get exactly the same result. I would rather have it go to the BZA where you have maximum control over future requests and you don't necessarily set a precedent that it's everybody that comes in with less than 40 acres. Because you might get another piece that's 39.1 acres and not want anything done on it that they want to do. And I think this gives you more latitude. You have the whole purpose for us doing the planned unit development when Ben talked to us was to say, we want to have more control than we would normally have over the zoning in that district of Dixie Highway so that we get premier kind of development that we want, not just whatever we didn't want it to look like Waterford. And the best example I could make of that was the video that's still running about the Holly Motorsports. Here was an old abandoned building for decades, 40 or 50 years, that looked like heck. And those people put a lot of money into it, and they did exactly the kind of things we would want in the overlay district to make that a beautiful facility now. I think that's a much better asset. In our prime objective, I thought was, how are we going to make sure we get Dixie Highway developed quality the way we want it, not looking like Waterford?
I want to make sure I understand. So you are advocating this go to the BZA?
Yes. And I think there's grounds to do it. It has an anomalous shaped property because the corner was cut off for the right of way. And if you look at the corridor for the utility companies, some of the farmers sold them to them. Some of them sold easements. There's a mix mash of whatever went on it. The entire easement for that same power grid on the township property is 100% the township's property. We just can't do anything with it.
And what my point, Bob, is that I think we all want the same thing. And now what we're talking about is what is the best procedure to get there? Yep. And I'm putting my BZA hat on and I'm saying, I think we would struggle with the constraints we have at the BZA, and that's where I'm looking for Michelle to help me here. But I think we would struggle with approving this because what we typically do at the BZA is the applicant comes in and says, I want to do this, but I can't meet your ordinance completely because of this hardship or the topography of the land or the this or that. And what we are saying right now is, we want the Planning Commission, Groveland Township wants this to be a certain zoning because it allows the Planning Commission, it allows the township to have more say as to how that can be developed. So that's why we want the PDU zoning. And the hardship is just, it doesn't meet the technical terms of the ordinance. And so that I'm struggling with, I understand everybody's saying we want to do this the right way. But I'm struggling if it goes to the BZA that isn't going to be very problematic for the BZA then with the constraints they have to approve this. And that's where I'm looking for Michelle to say, no, Jenny, you're looking at it the wrong way. It's not going to be an issue.
Well, I can't tell you that. I would say what the planning commissioners need to consider is if you want to stick to the very precise wording, your option is to send to the BZA, understanding that it's up to their interpretation and it's not a guarantee either way because they have to follow specific criteria.
Jim.
I can't speculate what the BZA will do.
With my limited memory here, in the ZBA, we deal with use and non-use variances. This to me is a dimensional variance that this gentleman would be asking for, which falls, to me, right in line with the ZBA. It's lack of better words and dispassionately, it's a dimensionally challenged site to meet the zoning. And I think we absolutely have the ability to do that in the zoning Board of Appeals.
Well, I can be persuaded to take this to the BZA. I think it will be a little challenging, but we'll work through it.
If we have to go that way, so be it. I'll follow Lynn's lead in that.
Well, we, we're going to leave the public hearing here pretty soon. And when we do, then we're going to make a motion on what we want to do with this. So I'm assuming from this discussion that we've had that the motion, and I'll ask one of you guys to make it, but it's going to be that if we approve this, it's conditional upon receiving the variance from the BCA to the acreage requirement stated. We can do that, right, Michelle? We can go ahead and approve this with the condition of receiving the variance.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So that's what I think we should do then. It sounds like that's where people are more comfortable going, and I'm fine with that. So if there's no more questions or comments or any public comments that we want, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing on the Rave property, rezoning of the Rave Inc. property.
It's 8:28.
Who was that?
I think that was, who was it?
Dave.
Dave, okay.
Second.
Is that Lynn second? Okay. And Danielle, if we'll take a roll call, please.
To close the meeting?
To close the public hearing.
Okay.
Jenny McKay,
Yes.
Jennifer Sevigny,
Yes.
Lynn Shank,
Yes, ma'am.
Jim Kelty,
Jim, are you still on mute?
Jim, you're muted. Jim,
Yeah.
help me, this or
Yes.
this?
Jim Kelty,
Yes.
Neil Loudon.
Yes.
Jennifer Sevigny, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot you.
Bill says
right.
also.
So we have now closed the public hearing. And now I would ask for a motion and a second, and we'll do a roll call vote afterwards. I'm gonna lean on my most experienced, meaning they've been on the board the longest. Ben, do you have your little sheet with you for making motions to do the rezoning?
Well, this one says they recommend it. I do not recommend it.
Well, Lynn, remember, we're gonna recommend contingent upon,
PDA.
right,
Okay, I move that we recommend to the township board, approval of the property 02-18-400-031. Section area land 39.4 or 9 or 5, 2, whatever. Change the voting or changed from RDF to PUD upon the recommendation of the township planner, and because it will be in conformance of the master plan after it goes to the ZBA with their approval,
If it gets-
if it gets approved by the ZBA.
Yeah, Lynn, I'm gonna, before we second, I wanna amend that, if I
Good.
could. So we are going to recommend to the township board approval, and then all the stuff that Lynn said of the parcel number, et cetera, for a zoning change from the REF to PUD contingent upon receiving a variance from the BZA on the required acreage.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
I'll second that.
And then, so before we take the roll call vote, Danielle, I just want to make sure, because we did kind of that, are you okay with the motion, how it was stated?
I'll review the minutes.
Okay, all right. That's good enough. So we'll do a roll call vote now.
Okay, who seconded, Jim?
Yes.
Okay, Jenny McKay,
Yes.
Jennifer Sevigny,
Yes.
Lynn Shank,
Yes, ma'am.
Jim Kelty,
Yes.
Jim Christopher,
Yes.
Neil Latlin,
Yes.
David Newbill.
Yes.
All right, so we are concluding that. It will be approved contingent upon the BZA, so Danielle will have to get a BZA meeting scheduled and we'll take up that matter. All right, the next item on the agenda will be moving to new business. And we have the review of the food truck ordinance. And what was helpful in reviewing the file where your, Michelle, you had inserted comments. And so as I went through and I looked at that, I'm gonna pull this up in my PDF and take a look at it. But one of the very first things that I think was a question is, do we want to, in our definitions, talk about allowing them to prepare food in the food truck, which I think that was our intent, but we need to talk about that as we go through this. Another thing that, you know, I thought about as we went through is, as it relates to the permitting process, you know, I think my thoughts were, I want to make sure that we don't put on the township staff any of the requirements regarding the safety, food safety of this. And so that we want to make sure that, excuse me, they're going to the appropriate state or county sources where they have to get licensed or approved for food service. So I want to make sure that, and you made a comment about making sure that they know they have to go through the Oakland County Environmental Health Food Service process. So I think you're right. We want to make it clear when anyone looks at this ordinance that, you know, there are other entities that are going to be involved and reviewing these vendors and the appropriate food safety measures that they're taking. Another comment, was, and I think about in our community, the one food truck that we've seen is on the southern end of our township on Dixie Highway. It's a barbecue truck that's near the old, I think its last generation was a Mexican food restaurant.
That's a,
And there's a barbecue truck there. And I think they have like picnic tables where people can pull into the parking lot and get food and then sit down at the table and eat. And so I think we want to discuss that. Do we want to, often the food trucks are in very urban areas where, you walk along the street, and you stop and you get a hot dog or a sandwich at some truck and you keep on, walking, you go to the park and sit down on a bench. And our environment's a little different here. On the other hand, when you think about food trucks, we want to make sure we're not bypassing the brick and mortar, where it's just easier for them to have a truck in a quote unquote outdoor restaurant. So I think there's some balance there. We want to talk about what we think we want in our community as we put together an ordinance. So those were kind of my thoughts as I went through it, and some of the comments that Michelle had made, that we might want to discuss and talk about as we review this. So with that, I'll pass it over to Michelle. If you have any other comments or thoughts that you had regarding this.
Sure. No, I think it's pretty good. I think those are some minor things to consider. The biggest problem I see, though, is that this is written as a part of the zoning ordinance, and then the processes at the bottom talk about an appeals process that doesn't go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So the township needs to decide if this is going to be a zoning ordinance clause. If so, then it needs to go through the BZA, or if it's going to be a police power ordinance, meaning it's just a city ordinance outside of the zoning, then you can create that process that you have that's maybe consistent with other appeals processes you have. But right now, that seems to be the biggest conflict to me.
Bob DePalmer, what are your thoughts?
Well, it seems to me the comments in there about how it was going to be policed was in case we had to revoke the license or Patty had to take money back or something from the clerk's office, if I remember correctly. I'm afraid that I don't have a real preference one or the other, but my thought is if you make it go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for dispute resolution, it'll never get there. They'll just do whatever they're gonna do, pack up truck and go the next day to the next thing and then come back again when they want to do it. I think that's why the language that Ben, I believe is the one who put that in here, was referencing that if somebody's not doing what they do, and I think we being the township, and I guess that's me, Patty, and probably Jerry, our ordinance officer, write them up a citation or cancel his license or something, because you can do that in a more timely basis than you could if you said, well, we don't like the way you're doing it, so now you got to go file a BZA, and that comes up in 2 months, and by then that guy will be long gone. Hey,
Yep.
That's my concern, I guess, Michelle. I think that's why Ben wrote it this way.
I agree with how Ben wrote it and how the process should go. I'm just saying then therefore it doesn't need to be in the zoning ordinance. It could just be a police power ordinance.
Okay. In other words, it's purely a policing organization instead of writing it. I understand what you're saying now. I misunderstood you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would say, I think the only way we can do it is a policing ordinance, because otherwise I think it never gets done. We have to be able to have somebody call in and say, hey, a guy's got a food truck there and I think he's not doing it the right way. And we have to be able to go say, you got your license? Did you get your permit? If you don't, close up and leave. So now that I understand what you're referencing, I would say leave it in the policing section.
Yes. Okay.
Patty, I don't want to cut you out of this. I see you on the call. You okay with that?
Patty back? You're on mute. She's saying something, but I can't tell what.
You're on mute, Patty.
In the lower left corner.
I got it. Tears came home. So, okay, ask me again.
I think we have to leave this as a policing ordinance, because if somebody complains about them not having the permit or not having the
Yeah.
Board of Health license, you and I have to be able to get Jerry to go out there right away and tell him to cease and desist. If we put it in the zoning ordinance, Michelle's saying then the corrective action will really be sent to the BZA, and that'll take forever, and the guy will be long gone. So I think we have to leave it as policing power in the township, so that if something comes up, you or I can get a hold of Jerry to go and enforce it.
I agree with that.
I just didn't want to make a commitment that you weren't comfortable with. That's all.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So that I'm clear, when you say you'll put it then as part of the policing power, then it'll be the township board that's going to go through the criteria and identify what parameters they want to put on this?
So the police power really is just going to refer to who, so anything in the zoning ordinance goes through the planning commission and the ZBA if there's an appeal. So this is going to go through, I have to read exactly Ben's process here, but yeah, it won't go through you and the ZBA. It'll go through staff or the clerk or whoever's issuing the citations. So
Michelle, is it in shape where we can send it to the township board for approval now?
I guess aside from those comments that I, mentioned, if you guys give me consensus on that, I can change that quickly and we can send it.
Okay, I would like the planning commission's consensus on that so that we have their input before it gets to the board. I agree.
I do.
So let me ask then, commission members, what are your thoughts regarding having tables, picnic tables, and temporary type tables around food trucks? Would you say that's okay or it's not okay? Because it does, it gives it a little bit more of a permanent type rather than the mobile food vending, but just your thoughts.
I think it would detract from the other sit-down restaurants in the township. We don't have that many to begin with. So we don't want to eat into their profits, I guess.
Yep. And what starts out as a picnic table, then you've got decorations, and then you've got an igloo bubble around it, and pretty soon it's just growing. And if you just say, no, it's a truck, it's portable, that's it.
I personally had made a note and thought that a table for like condiments or signage, sometimes they put signs out letting people know that they're there. Under number 9, it said their vendors are prohibited from locating, placing, and putting accessory items outside of the food truck, including but not limited to dining room furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It says nothing. You have to be self-contained and kept within the truck itself. And I sometimes find that a little bit tough.
So Jenny, you're saying that you're okay with tables or not? I don't understand.
Oh,
I'm saying maybe allowing a table for condiments and things that might pertain to the food that you have for people. But Jenny was talking about tables for sitting and eating. There's two different things.
Right. So in terms of the signage, like you mentioned, there is they do allow for signage, but it has to be like on the actual mobile
truck.
Yeah. But I could put language in that, allows for, an accessory table outside that, has the napkins, maybe the plastic silverware, the ketchup, the mustard, that if the planning commission was okay with that.
problem with that. They have to have trash receptacles and stuff like that, right?
Correct.
So
I'm
they're gonna
okay with the additional table.
have for condiments.
Yes.
Yeah. I would agree with that. But not the sit-down type furniture. Tables and chairs for dining.
You know, I guess I could go and take a look at it, but I think there was something in there also kind of regarding, I'd have to look it up, but basically, we don't want it parked there for a year, right? So these are mobile units. And so to me, there's got to be something that's keeping them from, it's got to be closed up. So this, for example, you have a table that's for condiments. I don't want a built-in, excuse me, wooden bench, you know, it's all decorative and it stays there forever, right? So we want to, my thoughts are whatever we do, all has to be mobile. It has to be, you know, something that is, you know, doesn't stay, there's no fixture that remains in a 24-hour period, right? It's during hours of operation. They could have a supplemental table for condiments, but it doesn't stay there all night long or all week long, are my thoughts.
And another thing, so I agree with that. Another thing to think about, which I made a note of, is hours of operation. So we can say, you know, you cannot have your truck anywhere past 9 p.m. or whatever you guys think is appropriate. So we can put parameters on time, and then the definition should definitely include, you know, you're not a permanent fixture. Your truck is also not a permanent fixture somewhere. Like, you've got to be mobile, so you're coming back and forth.
Yeah, because the barbecue one that we have down used to be 221 Baker Street, and then it turned into some Mexican place. But that, you know, former restaurant, that business, that truck stays there, you know, like all the time. It's like, you know, they decided they didn't want to invest in the building. They'll just use the parking lot and a truck. And that kind of, I think, goes against the intent of what we're thinking about with food.
Okay.
Is that place in Groveland Township? Or is
No.
that Independence?
But the applicant started this whole process, if you remember, was the Brazilian food guy located in the building across the street from the dollar store on M15.
Yep.
And I'm not sure, Jenny, but didn't he ask about, well, could I leave it there all the time and do it? So I think to your point, you don't want that to turn into a permanent park restaurant, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I just want, because that was, it's going back a ways, but that's what I thought he was contemplating doing.
Yeah, and then he'd move it once in a while if he had an event, but he was looking to basically say, I want to open up a business on this parcel of land, but have it be a truck.
Yeah, and I don't think that's, you're saying you don't think that's what we want.
No, I don't.
So
Lynn?
that's what we need the feedback for the board, so that we approve it the right way, because I think that has a distinct possibility of turning in what you're describing that's going on down in Springfield.
Lynn?
Well, the word mobile means you move. So I agree, maybe not 9 o'clock, because in the summer it gets still light. And I'm looking at, you know, the Renaissance Festival or something like that. They have movies after the festival or whatever, but they have to move at the end of the night. It must be gone. And anything they have, such as a table for condiments or anything, has to be gone at the end of each day. You cannot spend the night. So mobile is what it means.
So I could maybe say something like, if it's related to an event, that the truck needs to be gone within an hour of the time the event closes, so they have time to close down. But when it's not related to an event, we might want an actual time, like 10 p.m.
Yeah, I think, you know, 10 p.m. is a good time, particularly because, You know, it might be near some place where there's neighbors and stuff, but I think if it would be okay to allow for an exception, you know, where they could get maybe some permit, maybe there's something going on at the ORV park and it's a 3-day, you know, event. And they say, hey, you know, can I have an exception and stay parked there for 3 days? And it would require approval from the township for, you know, a special event where they could maybe not have to move it all the time. Because you might have people come from, you know, Detroit or elsewhere for a big event at the ORV park. And you might have you know, you want to allow them the opportunity where everything's got to be contained within the truck, but they could leave the truck there for 3 days during the event, let's say. So I think allowing for an exception, you know, that the township would approve would be okay.
Yeah,
That
is
go-
there
would
already a
that go on the application when they apply if it's a one-time show?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a,
That way the hours of operation might meet the event, and to your point, Jenny, you know, the length of the event, you know, you know exactly what the requirements are going to be for that one-shot deal. But then if they go on later through the year to other events, it's different rules.
Okay. Just in terms of timing then, when are the trustees meeting? So would this wouldn't come back to the planning commission again?
February, we're doing the budget. That's gonna take all the time. If you could have it for March or
Got it.
April, I think would be okay, just so it's
Okay.
ready. I don't think anybody's gonna be doing food trucks until the COVID thing gets lifted anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
And then I had another question is, so you said what zones it can go in, and it can't be public property. So what is your preference that it's, you know, probably not in a right of way, so it's in a parking lot?
Well, I've never had experience with one of these, but I assume they do things like the Renaissance Festival in their parking lot. They've had some food trucks there.
They do it in downtown Ortonville once or twice a year.
Don't they?
Yeah, they'll just park the trucks right downtown, 4 or 5 trucks, and everybody comes for the evening. It's kind of a fun, you know, social thing.
If we get our township property developed, that's probably a place somebody might do some of them at different events there or something, or
Yeah.
we have our car show we have it at Mount Holly this year, you know, again, they might come there because we tried to get a couple of food trucks there last time.
Yep.
I think that's the kind of, most of that's recreational or commercial property, I guess. What I don't think we want to have, and we've had a problem in the past, is somebody had a food truck and then they parked it in their driveway at home and were serving people in their driveway at home, and people were complaining about it because they said, you know, it's not a business. And so I think it would be zoning districts other than residential, I guess.
Right. Okay.
All right, so I've got a question. Say I have a graduation party.
Oh.
Can I engage a food truck for a particular party at my house?
I mean, not according to how it's written now.
Well, but if they're not selling, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Right? If you got to pay for it, Jim. You bring it on your property. You're providing the food to your guests.
Yeah.
But if you have your guests pay, it's different.
Okay, I just didn't know what the demarcation would be.
wait, I'm sorry. I'm not sure I understand the difference. So currently it's not permitted in residential uses. I mean,
I can cater, I can bring O'Malley's Galley in their trailer onto my property and they can barbecue a pig and serve my guests.
Vince did his daughter's wedding.
Yeah, so Michelle, the concept is different ways that you cater food to your guests at your party. And if you wanted to bring a food truck to your party instead of, you know, someone that's roasting a pig in a trailer behind their truck versus a caterer who comes with a truck and serves it on platters on tables, I don't see a difference there. You're catering food through an outside vendor on your property to your guests. And I just don't see that being a food truck issue.
Okay.
Selling. The food truck at your activity is not selling the food. It's commissioned from you,
Yeah.
owner, you're paying for it.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, this is where we get to the Highlander games and all that baloney that we went through, you know, or people that rent out their barns for weddings. If they were to bring something on site and sell it to the residents, then I think you got a problem.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So I'll continue to work on this. Would you also like me to make the application?
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial.
Okay.
I have nothing to draw on, so whatever you come up with, I'm sure we'll use.
So, Michelle, when you say make the application,
Mm-hmm.
what do you mean by that?
So someone will have to apply for the permit.
Oh, I got it. I'm sorry. The application that they'll submit.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, this is going back a little bit and I don't want to change subjects. I just want to make sure this isn't part of it. You gave us a recommended zoning amendment that goes to the Oakland County Coordinating Zoning Committee. You gave us a form. So I want to talk about that, but that's not part of this discussion, correct? So.
Are you saying me? I did not include that form.
Danielle, then I'm going to ask. I thought you gave a suggestion, Michelle, that was sending if we do the rezoning from REF to the PUD, that we send, if we do that, then there's also, we send it on to the Oakland County Coordinating Zoning Committee.
I think that may have come from Danielle, that recommendation.
Okay.
Parcels that are on the township.
Right. Because I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I think it is not applicable to anything we're discussing tonight. And so I just want to make sure that I'm correct and we don't need to spend any time talking about it. Is that true?
I think you are correct.
Okay, we won't spend time talking about it. So back on the food truck, are we all set, Bob? You've got the input that you need, and Michelle, you've got what direction you need?
We're going to do it probably on the April board meeting, I'm guessing. If that's too tight, we could even squeak it one after that, but I think we could do it by April.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Okay.
Who decides the fee structure? Who decides the fee structure for the annual and the daily permit?
Probably Patty and I. Based on what Michelle gets us from some other applications she uses to develop hers, and we'd probably take that as the benchmark to start from. That's kind of, most of the fees and stuff in the township are ultimately derived from looking at the similar fees from other communities for the same kinds of things, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Board
Blank has, we could check with Graham Blank. I don't know, does anybody know if Ortonville charges them to come in when they have that?
I don't know if they're doing that through DDA or who's
Yeah.
doing it.
I think it's through the DDA, so I'm
Yeah.
thinking they're not gonna charge them on it. They want them to come. Because they're trying to draw people to the downtown area. I don't know if Springfield, does anybody know? Does Springfield charge the barbecue guy?
Probably ask Laura, I bet you she knows.
Yeah, we could check with Laura on that.
Septemberfest. At Septemberfest, they always have those food trucks, and I bet they charge them because they charge to put a booth up. They'll charge people for the food trucks.
Yeah. Springfield.
They might, and they might charge for the downtown the couple times they have them outside of Septemberfest.
Blank has a big thing every week during the summer, I think,
Yeah.
where they have food trucks in the parking lot of the high school.
Yep.
And I can find out if they charge the food trucks for that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll just have to do some asking around. And Michelle, if you know of what the going rate is for communities of our size to charge for that.
Sure, I can pull some, but I would also just say that we just want to make sure that the fee covers the amount of time, your time as staff people to do this. So it's generally a nominal fee. If it takes you an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, we figure out what that would be. That you're not losing money on permitting.
Right. Okay. Yep. We're very open to your input, so.
Okay.
All right, I think we're done with that topic and we can move on to the discussion for the sewer ordinance. So,
If I may, Madam Chair,
yes,
I am right in the midst of figuring out whether there's ever even going to be sewers or not, because George Cullis from Holly and I have had numerous meetings on this in the last 2 weeks. And I, rather than go through the ordinance, which I see was, I think, taken from Springfield and might be very good if we do it, I think it's premature. I'll just give you a quick synopsis. It went from 6 million to 15 million to 35 million to 110 million. And we said, we're going to stop having meetings. You keep on adding too much money. And so they came back down to 35 million, which is only 6 times what they originally told us. And I'm seriously questioning the way that they did this, whether it's feasible, and that's going to probably take me a couple of other weeks. So I think rather than tie everybody up any longer tonight, if it's okay, I'd suggest moving this off to at least next month or the month after. By then we'll know where we're going with it, or not.
I am happy to do that.
You might be, thank you.
The question, the one question I have though is just kind of a timing. So you're in discussions and you want, if we go forward, you want to have a sewer ordinance in place? Is that?
You almost have to have a sewer ordinance in place to be able to determine how you're going to eventually charge and what's going to be required. And the county will give some input on how they want to do that. I'm just telling you that based on sometimes I feel like George and I are on a train going north and the people doing the study are on a train going south, and we never talk to each other because we keep on telling them the exact same issues. And they go, yeah. And so George and I have agreed today, we're going to set up a meeting. They're going to tell us exactly how they think they can do this because we don't think it can work the way they pitched it. And so once that happens, you're going to have plenty of long time to do this, because if they approved it tomorrow, it'll be 2 years till the sewer's in. So we'll have plenty of time to go over an ordinance if we get one and need it. The first thing we got to do is solidify whether or not we're even going to do the sewers. And George and I have decided, we have been telling them the same thing repeatedly. And I've had numerous meetings with some of the potential clients on it this last 2 weeks. And we're not doing any more until they can explain to us how they think this works and doesn't bankrupt 2 townships.
And I would say the only reason I included those examples is to show that it's not really I'm probably not the best person to be writing that. If you look at it, it's very heavily based on how you're going to charge people and what the violations are. And that's going to be based on, what's a fair fee and some legislation and engineering. So
most of that, Michelle, comes back from the water commissioner in the county when they actually get done, because my understanding is if you do it, the county signs the bond for the project to get it in, and then goes back to the 2 municipalities and says, now you got to sign an agreement for us on how you're going to pay it. And that's creating a lot of friction. Okay. So I agree with you, Michelle. I think it's very involved. There's a lot of technical stuff, and they say the county sets a lot of those requirements. It's good for me to have that though for a reference. It's just that I think we'd be spinning our wheels trying to set it out right now when I don't even know for sure if the sewers will materialize or will materialize the way they've been pitching them.
Agreed. Okay.
So one last question, Michelle and Bob. Based on the previous discussion that we had, it almost sounds like a sewer ordinance would not be a zoning ordinance, but it would be a policing ordinance. And so that would go through the township board and not through the planning commission.
I think that's right, isn't it, Michelle? Because basically it's charging fees for the tap-in and stuff. It's not, there's no real zoning issues on it. The only requirements tend to be like, are you in the sewer district? What is your tap-in fee? Under what conditions do you have to tap in? That kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. So we really don't need to talk about this tonight. All right, let's move on because it's getting late. Do we have any public still on this Zoom call that have any comments on topics we have not covered that under the agenda? I don't think we have any public left with us. All right. So I will then move on to the master plan and the Dixie overlay, and I'll just give a overview and then let Bob and Michelle chime in with anything they have. But we've talked about developing the master plan and the Dixie overlay, and Ben worked on this. We had several years ago now meetings with the public for visioning sessions, and we've kind of went back and forth, and Bob and I provided input, and Michelle has taken kind of the final product that Ben had that we had added some comments on, and now come up with this draft. And we decided that it's a lot of material to review and think about. And so we wanted to roll it out today and then have you spend time to look at it. So before our next meeting, which will be in 2 months, but you can have an opportunity to get input back to Michelle on comments that you have so that she can consolidate all of that. But again, our, just in a high level, we are looking at, as you update your master plan, you're trying to look at, some forward thinking for the township. And part of the visioning sessions were to get the community together and say, okay, what is it about our community that you like, you want to keep? What are the things you'd like to develop, or not develop? And so part of it is for us as a planning commission to have a bit of a roadmap to follow based on community input as we do zoning. And tonight was a great example of, what do we think we want in the future for our community along Dixie Highway? And is this, PUD zoning in line with kind of the vision that we have? And so if you question it, then you go back to your master plan and say, well, what is it, those folks, 10 years ago were thinking about they wanted, and, and is that what the community wants? So it's a roadmap, really, guidelines for when you develop your zoning or change your zoning, that you do it consistent to a bigger vision of what you want. So that's what we're trying to do. And in the master plan, you'll see that there's been some analysis of data to say, where is Groveland Township heading? Are we going to be a young 20-plus-year-old, vibrant community? Are we looking at a more aging population? Or are we going to have young kids? And, so you're trying to look at what are your demographics? What does it look like as far as housing needs? What do you have? What do you think you're going to need in the future? And so we want to put all that together so that it's a nice reference tool for the planning commission as we go forward and do zoning. So with that, I'll hand it over to Michelle. You've put a yeoman's work into this, taking it from Ben. Ben put a lot of work into this, and we owe a lot to him for the efforts that he put into this. And then Michelle's, helping us to complete this. So with that, I'll pass it on to Michelle.
Sure, no, you should have an honorary planning degree at this point. I mean, you explained it just how I would. I really just added a little bit more data as I was going through to figure out, you know, what some good strategies would be. So, and of course I reformatted it. So the crux of it though, when you get to the end where there's, you know, the action plan, most of that remains the same. And that's probably the main part that we'll want to be all on the same page with. So I urge you as you're going through it, you know, you can start at the end, and then you'll want to go back and make sure that we have, you know, evidence to support those kinds of actions. I will say it gets a little tricky with the, you know, a public board and turning in, you know, comments. So I would say maybe just keep all of your comments, make notes of them, and we can talk about them all as a group the next time that we meet.
Oh, okay, so you think, you know, because of a public body, we're not able to just send you our comments individually?
You certainly shouldn't be like sending them to each other, you know, and talking about them. And if you send them all to me individually, that's going to get complicated for me because you might all have different opinions and different thoughts. I mean, you could do that, but I'm not going to make any big changes, or I'm not going to modify the document until I've talked to you about your comments anyways. So you can feel free to send them to me individually so that I have something to work off next time, but I won't change anything based on that until I know I have consensus from the group.
That's, very good. That's a.
Michelle, was this created in some type of like maybe Microsoft Word by any chance, this document that we now have as a PDF? And if it was, can you send it as unprotected so I can put notes on it?
I can try to, so I don't use Word here when we lay that out. So that's why it's a PDF, but I can convert it to a Word. I don't know why it's password protected. I don't even know how to do that.
I mean, I can make my notes on the PDF. If you had it in Word, it was a little easier.
I can put it in, I can export it into Word, hopefully, and it should come out pretty decent.
All right, great.
Formatting is a little bit messed up, but yeah, I'll make a note to myself to do that.
Yeah, it's hard without the right tools to comment on the PDF.
Okay.
All right, so any questions on that? And as far as the two topics, I will remain forever a little confused. I'll be the first to admit. When we're talking about the Dixie overlay discussion and we talk about the master plan discussion, what we have that you sent out is the master plan.
I sent out both.
Did I?
So you have the master plan draft, and then you have a draft of the Dixie Highway overlay language.
Jenny, PDF 4 is where the overlay is found.
Okay, I missed that.
But I'd like to clarify, what's the confusion about those two?
I looked through it and I didn't see it. I must have missed the Dixie overlay discussion, that it's a separate document in a different file. Is that what you're saying, Jim?
Yeah, we got 5 emails from Danielle, and the one that has PDF 4 is an attachment. It's in there.
That's the 25 page.
Yeah.
It starts on page 3 of that document.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
It looks like this.
Yeah, okay. I missed that.
Danielle, I'm wondering if maybe she also, because I also didn't receive that email. Maybe you didn't get the email with, because there was 5 emails.
5?
right? With 5 separate.
Correct.
I got it. I missed it. Because I went, I jumped over and I saw the annual report in 4 and I missed the corridor. Okay. That was my mistake. You sent it out correctly, Danielle, to me anyway. All right. Same thing on the Dixie Highway corridor. We'll discuss that in our next meeting, but please review and have comments and be ready to share your comments in our next meeting.
I will say also, these are 2 very big, important documents. So depending on whatever else crops up in the next 2 months to be put on the agenda, it could be a very long meeting. I can't predict. It depends on what your comments are, what your questions are, but generally they're time consuming. So
yeah, I would.
Yeah.
That's a great point, Michelle, and I appreciate it. And if we can keep this the only topic on the next meeting, I'd like to do that. And if we have other topics that need to be, can we just schedule another meeting? But I'd like to have one meeting for this discussion.
I think that's good. I think it's
Special meeting it if you want.
I'm sorry, Jim, what?
Special meeting it if you want.
Yes.
yes.
No special meetings.
No, I think we might have to do this. We're just never going to get through this otherwise. Everybody's got to go through it again.
All right, and so then that, if there's no other comments, then that takes us to the annual report discussion. And this is something that Ben had mentioned to me, I think about 2 years ago. And he's like, do you put together the annual report? I said, what annual report? And then I said, Bob, do you know about an annual report? And we both scratched our head, and Ben said, well, you're supposed to put one together. We said, oh, great. Go for it, Ben. So he did an annual report for us. And so we had the same discussion this year. And so we punted to Michelle. And it's really just to, summarize what the events of the 2020 year was in activities for the Planning Commission. So Michelle put that document together, and I'll let her explain it from there.
Yes. So, I mean, as you all know, I wasn't really at any of your 2020 meetings except for the very last one. So I built this based on meeting minutes, which is perfectly good resource to use. Probably would use that anyways if I had attended everyone. So I just compiled those together. And I believe Bob's looked at them. So hopefully there's nothing major missing, but if you guys want to be one extra set of, or 6 extra set of eyes on it. But otherwise, the only thing I need to do at this point is add the meeting minutes that you just approved today for the November meeting, so I can put those in, and add one last thing to the appendix, which is just your schedule of meetings from 2020, and then you can bring it to the Board of Trustees to show all the work you've done this year.
I'm good with that. Is everyone else? I thought it was a nice job, and it's very similar to what Ben did. It's just a summary through meeting minutes of what were the activities that we did in 2020. And I thought you did a very nice job, particularly in view that you weren't at. All right. Oh, the one thing though, we did have Jennifer as a board member in the last meeting. You had Jean Sylvia for 2020, but we actually had Jennifer in the last, no, you were in the November meeting, correct?
I've been in, this is my 3rd meeting.
Okay. So you were in November, but which one? I don't think it was a.
It's
the
September.
actual Planning Commission. I think it was just one.
1 second.
Was it September?
Oh, yeah.
September 22nd, November 23rd.
Okay. Very good.
I was
Yes.
in 2.
Yep. Yep.
I started in September.
Time flies. All right, so,
Yes, it does.
so Michelle, if you could just make that correction.
So I'm substituting out, so you replaced someone?
Jean Sylvia.
Okay,
Or retired just prior to September's meeting.
okay. Okay,
Thank you. It was a nice report. I appreciate it. I think it looked good.
Yes.
I really did just use Ben, Ben had it all set up, so he made it very easy.
Before we adjourn, how is Ben doing?
Yeah.
So I see him generally about once a week via Zoom for our internal meetings. And I would say last time we spoke, he, hasn't greatly improved or greatly declined. He's just been being, his strong spirited self. But he is attending our meetings again, and he hadn't for a while. So I would take that as a good sign.
Good, good.
So
Well,
that-
send our best to him, would you, when you see him?
Absolutely.
Yeah, tell him we all said hi, wish him the best.
Sure, will do.
I ordered a plaque for him. I don't know where it is. I gotta check on it tomorrow. But when I get done, I'd like to write a cover letter and maybe get everybody in the planning commission. and the town.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. It's very kind.
All right, Lynn, your favorite time in the meeting has arrived.
Can we adjourn? Yay. And it's what time, Bob? 9:21?
9:21.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All
Third.
in favor? Aye.
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 If anyone's opposed, you're getting off. Good night, everyone. Good to see you.
Good night, everyone.